Hey guys, today I got a little bit of a different video, a different style of video. We're going to be going over how to make your own solo loadouts, your own solo flawless loadouts, and what to understand when you're building them. The main reason I wanted to make this is because, yes, you can just look up guides and just copy their loadout and go for it, but I think it's more fun to make your own loadouts, and to actually understand making your own loadouts will get you farther than just following video guides all the time. Anyways, so that's what I have here today. And quickly go over what we're going to actually go over. We're going to be going over survivability, damage, and practice. And damage, I don't just mean just strictly boss damage. Damage, I mean like adclear and damage combined. So we're going to be going over those three topics. This might be a lengthier video. I'm not really sure yet. But I know the survivability part and the damage part are kind of long. So let's just get right into it. Also, if you ever have any questions, just leave it in the comments. Join my Discord. There'll probably be something on screen now so you can see the link. It'll also be in the description as always, and probably in the comment section. So, alright, let's get right into the video. So, first off, we have survivability. There are different ways to survive. You know, you can take cover, you can run by everything, you can kill them before they kill you. And then there's things that will heal us or grant damage reduction / give us more effective hit points. And what I mean by effective hit points, like overshield isn't technically, I don't know if it actually counts as health, but it's something like overshield. So, we're going to be going over first all the universal stuff that any class can use. And I've got a document on the right side of my screen, so I'm going to be reading off that in just a second. You've got certain exotic weapons that can heal you, like Vigilance Wing. Honestly, I think that's the only one. I can't think of another one off the top of my head. But they might grant certain class things like Devour, etc. Whatever. You've got resistance mods on your chest plate, alongside mods like Font of Endurance, which will buff your certain stats depending on what it is. So Font of Endurance will buff your resilience. And there's like other ones, probably like Font of Discipline or whatever. You've got Emergency Reinforcement, which will give you extra damage resistance when your shields are broken, and then Recuperation, which gives you health on orb pickup. You've got Healing Grenade on Solar, Ember of Mercy, which makes all fire sprites grant restoration on pickup. You've got Ember of Resolve, which will give you Cure on Solar Grenade final blows. Thread of Warding, which will give Woven Mail on orb pickup. Whisper of Chains, which gives damage reduction near stasis crystals, like the big crystals, not just the ones that fall on the ground. Whisper of Rhyme, which will grant overshield after picking up stasis shards. Spark of Haste, which will grant damage reduction and improved recovery while sprinting. Spark of Resistance, damage reduction when surrounded. Echo of Vigilance will give you overshield on defeating targets while your shields are depleted. Echo of Leeching will give you health regeneration on melee kills. Echo of Obscurity grants invisibility on finishers. And then finally, Echo of Starvation's Devour on Orb or Void Breach pickup. I might have missed something there, but I spent like 30 minutes to an hour going over all the classes on my own. So if I missed something, let me know. But I'm pretty sure that's all of them. If not, the most important things are there, like Healing Grenade, and Ember of Mercy, and then the Woven Mail one. So these can be used on literally any class. There should be no issues using any of these. Anything I just mentioned, you should be able to use. But now we're going to go over some of the specifics for each class. So first, we're going to start with Titan. And we'll go to Hunters, and then we'll go to Warlock. So for Titans, Titan-specific things are going to be Throwing Hammer, which will give you Cure on pickup. And Cure is giving you health instantly, so Cure is health, and Restoration is uninterruptible healing. You have Soul Invictus Sunspots, which will grant you Restoration just by walking into them. Into the Fray will give you Woven Mail on Supercast or Tangle Destruction, very, very strong. Banner of War will give you Healing Pulses depending on the stacks. The stacks will increase the rate of healing. Increase the rate at which you get the healing. And then you have the Knockout Arc aspect on melee kills, granting health regeneration. So a little, just before I get into the next part, health regeneration and restoration are two different things. Restoration is regeneration, but it's uninterruptible. While regeneration means, regeneration is when you get hit, you instantly stop regenerating your healing. You have to wait for your recovery timer to go back. You know, if you have like, tier 100 recovery, it takes like 2 seconds or whatever. I don't know the actual time. But the big difference between regeneration and restoration is that restoration, no matter what, if you're taking damage, it will keep healing you as long as you have restoration proc. Very, very important to know the difference. Then we have our exotics. We have Insurmountable Skull Fort, which gives health on arc melee kills. Mask of the Quiet One, which gives you health when you're critical HP. Helmosine 14, which will grant you overshield. One-Eyed Mask, which grants health regeneration when you kill the last thing that shot you or did damage to you. Precious Scars, which will give you healing and restoration to nearby allies. Laurenly Splendor will cast a Sunspot when you're low on HP, granting improved restoration. quote-unquote improved. I don't know the actual stats for it. If you like to run swords, Stronghold will grant restoration when you damage targets after blocking a certain amount of shots. No backup plans grants overshields and health regeneration on rapid shotgun kills or defeating a powerful combatant, but you can only use this on Void. Crest of Alpha Lupi, which will grant a healing pulse when your barricade is cast. Curse of the Falling Star, which will give you an overshield the longer distance you were when you casted your Thunder Crash. So if you cast it and you fly super far away, your overshield would last longer. Mark 44 Standicides will grant you overshield when sprinting at full HP, and you have your shoulder charge ready to use. So if your charge for shoulder charge isn't full, you can't use it. You don't get anything. And then finally, Antaeus Wards, which will deflect incoming projectiles. And so Antaeus Wards, it doesn't technically give you like an overshield or health. It is deflecting damage, which it's kind of like a throwaway there. I wanted to put it in there. I didn't want to just leave it out. It seems it can be used for staying alive. So. But for the most part, Titans can stay alive pretty damn well. Not as good as Warlock, but they're still pretty good. Banner of War and Strand will keep you alive in most content as long as you keep your stacks up and maintain it. Unless you get nuked or you're playing too far out in the open. So just make sure you're playing up behind a little bit of cover, you have your grapple ready. The Sunspots, when using Soul Invictus, will grant you free restoration, which you can use to keep up Ember of Empyrean. Which you can use by keeping up Ember of Empyrean. So you have Ember of Empyrean on, you're getting Solar Weapon or Solar Ability Final Blows. And you just keep your restoration up over and over again, or you can walk into another Sunspot. And while it's not as strong as restoration times 2, it's free healing, just off of getting solar kills or ignitions. So as long as you aren't too aggressive, you shouldn't die while using it. Although some encounters or some difficulties, like, master stuff or day 1, restoration isn't nearly as strong, and you'll probably just end up dying anyways. But play a little safer when you have normal restoration. It's still very, very good. And then you have some sort of instant health regen off of Arc when you're using Knockout. It's not the greatest thing ever, but it can save you a couple times. And I know, like, for example, the Spire second encounter, I actually was running Arc there for my Soul of Falls guide, and it worked out great. So. Not to mention, we have some insanely good exotics like Lordly Splendor and Precious Scars. So you should be good on Titan. Titan is kind of like the middle ground, and then as we're getting into it, Hunter's kind of like lower, while they're still very good. Hunter's a little lower when it comes to survivability, depending on what class you run. And then Warlocks are, by far the best. So now we're going to go on to Hunters. Hunters, for Solar, Strand, and Stasis, they have no unique healing aspect or damage reduction. Which means they still have, the stuff I mentioned earlier, but they don't have anything that's unique to themselves, like the hammer pickup for when you hit an enemy on Titan, you get your cure, or, the restoration times 2 you get from Phoenix diving on Warlock. So for Arc, when you're amplified, the flow state aspect will give you reduced damage while dodging, and Combination Blow gives you your HP back and your dodge back on melee kills. For Void, you have Spectral Blades, which will grant you intrinsic invincibility, and yes, invisibility doesn't actually give you health or damage reduction, but to an extent, you're not going to be taking any damage because you're invisible, nothing's going to be shooting you. So, again, it's another iffy thing to put in there, but I'm still going to put it in there because invisibility is extremely strong. Spectral Blade has its backflip invisibility thing, right? The Vanishing Step aspect will make you invisible when dodging. Trapper's Ambush makes you invisible when you get hit by your smoke cloud on impact, or you can jump up in the air and press your dive, and you'll go invisible, and your teammates will as well. And then Stylish Executioner will grant invisibility when defeating weakened, suppressed, or volatile targets. So any sort of void debuff target, you'll get invisibility for free. Now, specifically, Hunter Exotics, we have Worm Husk, which will grant health and shield on dodge. Assassin's Cowl, which will grant invisibility and health and shield on melee final blows or finishers. Very, very good exotic. This is a hard one to pronounce. Cyratek, whatever. Facade grants Woven Mail when using your grapple. Liar's Handshake heals you when you use your Arc melee ability and hit an enemy or get hit by a melee attack and you melee back. Renewal Grass, grant damage reduction when you're inside a Dust Field Grenade. Moth Keepers, I'm pretty sure when you're in solo content, Moth Keepers, the Void Moth will fly back to you and give you Overshield. If not, you're using Moth Keepers, it'll give your teammates Overshield. Omnioculus grants damage resistance when invisible. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think the Omnioculus DR is just for your teammates. So even if it isn't just for you, even if you don't get it, you're still getting invisibility. So super, super good. And you get a second grenade. Second smoke grenade. Zombies will grant you damage resistance when you're in the air. And Star Eaters will give you an Overshield when you have max stacks of Feast of Light. And then an honorable mention to Gear Falcons, because you can basically infinitely go in and out of invisibility while applying the debuffs, but you need to have on Stylish Executioner. So Gear Falcons doesn't technically give you the invisibility, it allows you to make invisibility constantly as long as you have Stylish Executioner on. So it is one of the best, but it's not technically an exotic that will do it by itself. So that's how I worded it there. But depending on how you look at it, Hunters have the worst survivability, but they still have a lot more versatility in their survivability with easy procs of invisibility, infinite combination bloods that give great ad clear and health, and Assassin's Cowl, which is by far one of the best exotics in the game. So depending on how you combo them together, Hunters will either be the worst or one of the best surviving classes. You also have Amniakis, which is insane for team play and GMs, and Gear Falcons, which is insane for ad clear with the volatile rounds that it gives you and invisibility. So Hunters have an insane lineup, but again, depending on what you're running, what you want to run, like if you decide to run Stasis, you're going to probably have the worst survivability possible. So, and then finally, we have Warlocks. For Warlocks, Arc and Stasis have no unique healing aspects, damage resistance, but Warlocks do have a healing rift for all subclasses. So you could count that as being unique, but it's kind of a given that Warlocks, have a healing rift. So Warlocks have Well of Radiance, Phoenix Dive, which grants Cure, and then with Heat Rises, you also grant Restoration ×2. Icarus Dash, which cures you when you're airborne and rapidly defeating targets. Heat Rises, which will give you a burst of Cure when consuming your grenade. Touch of Flame, which will enhance your healing grenade, giving more Cure and Restoration ×2 instead of ×1. Weave Walk, which will grant damage restoration when activated. Child of the Old Gods, which grants you health when draining a target with the child as long as you have an Empowering Rift on. And Feed the Void, which grants Devour when defeating a target with a Void ability. You also get the Enhanced Devour, enhancing the amount of health and grenade energy you get back. And then for Warlock exotics, we have the Stag, which will give you damage reduction when standing in a rift. Apotheosis Veil, which will grant health on Supercast. Alongside that, you also get extremely fast melee and grenade energy, which I'll talk about that again later. Apotheosis Veil is very good. Carcines, which grants Restoration ×1 on normal melee kills and Restoration ×2 on finishers. Probably the best survivability exotic in the game. Controverse Holds, which reduces the incoming damage when charging your Void Grenade. Wings of Sacred Dawn, which grants damage resistance while midair. Prometheum Spur, which grants healing and empowering rifts whenever you defeat combatants with Daybreak. I wasn't sure if this one really counted, because you're not technically getting the healing or the extra damage for empowering rift unless you go over and sit in it. I just wanted to throw that one in there as well. And then Secant Filament, which will grant Devour when casting an empowering rift. Warlocks by far have the strongest basic survivability. Well of Radiance alone just destroys any other option for all the other classes. And if you want the best chance of surviving, you're probably just going to play Warlock anyways. But besides Well, we have probably the best exotic in the game, Karnstein Armlets, because you're getting the free Restoration ×2, as long as you can get near an enemy to finish them. It's by far one of the best things in the game. Restoration ×2 isn't the easiest to proc on other subclasses, and the fact that Warlock has it just with pressing G or F or whatever your finisher is unbelievably broken. Super, super good. And on top of that, they have Well of Radiance, and healing grenades from Touch of Flame. Warlocks also have an Enhanced Devour on Void, which just grants a greater amount of health. And back in the day, it was just, if you had Devour, you just instantly got all your health back. And I'm pretty sure the Enhanced Devour basically does the same thing now, or if not, is very close to max. I haven't really got to use it a ton. So, Void, you still have a very good amount of, a very good area of survivability of Devour. And then for your exotics, again, you have Karnsteins, you have Apotheosis Veil, which grants you health, but also the insane melee and grenade energy regeneration, which more on that later again. And then you have the Stag, which is some nice passive damage reduction as long as you're standing in any sort of rift. Warlocks, you guys are chilling big time when it comes to surviving, as long as you like to run Solar or you like to run Karn. Now, I know that was a lot to go over, but there's going to be a condensed version at the end of the guide if you just want some specific exotics to run, and you don't want to come back here and just listen to all this again. So, now, we're going to talk about damage and ad clear. So, damage is extremely important. If you don't have good damage, you're not going to be able to beat the encounter, or you're going to be there forever. So the main topics of damage are going to be our weapons, our subclass and its super, and what exotic you're running. There's a lot to go over weapon-wise, so I'm going to try to keep it sort of simple, going over the basics of weapon rolls and what to look for, since if I didn't, we'd just be here all day. And there's a ton of exotic weapons too, so there's that. I could maybe make a separate video on this if you want me to, but honestly, there's other people out there who are just way better at explaining that shit than me, and I feel like the amount of time it would take me to learn that and then regurgitate it, you would have been able to watch that video hundreds of times over. So maybe I'll look into it though. We'll see what happens, and let me know if you want it. So first, we're gonna start off with our weapons. If you do not have a good basic weapon loadout, you're gonna be here forever. So your primary weapons are going to be the weapons that are going to be mainly for adclear or, proccing something like bait and switch. Primary weapons have some great ad clearing perks like Firefly, Dragonfly, Incandescent, and Volt Shot. And these perks will usually allow you to kill more than one ad while only shooting one ad. So you're not going to have to flick back and forth between killing all the enemies. You're using Incandescent. It's just going to blow everything up around it. Same thing with Firefly and Dragonfly. There's also perks like Demolitionist, where killing enemies will allow you to use your abilities more often, which ends up making ad clear easier. Now, special weapons tend to have a way easier time at doing this, since these weapons tend to be either built for ad clear or for damage. So you've got great ad clear perks on these like Chain Reaction, Reservoir Burst, and then you've got Incandescent and Volt Shot again, and Dragonfly. Usually, using special weapons to ad clear is a lot easier than using a primary, but sometimes you want to use your special weapon for damage. And even then, using your special weapon for damage doesn't mean that it can't be used for ad clear, so keep that in mind. Then for damage encounters, we're usually going to be looking for a mix of rotation for swapping guns. We're going to want to get off as much damage as possible, so we want to look at our guns, see what kind of perks we have, and see if we can maybe mag dump our grenade launcher, since it has auto-loading on it, then swap to our special, and then mag dump that. So we want to look at all of our perks and see what fits the best. So to go over some good perks, primary weapons have a couple good perks like Vorpal, they have Kinetic Tremors, 4 times the Charm, Surrounded, etc. There's more. These weapons aren't usually used at base for damage unless you're using something like a Lucky Pants Hunter. And you're usually going to prioritize using your heavy and special over this. But having a good primary weapon that can do good damage might end up saving your run. Just for example, something like Day 1 Caretaker and Valor Disciple. And I know that's a little unrelated because this is a solo guide for the most part, but if you ever get into some sort of, last stand where you're about to die and you just need to stick it out and you have no ammo, a good primary weapon can save your run. So just keep that in mind. And then for special weapons, we can usually output a great amount of damage if we have our loadout set up correct. Again, like earlier. Some great damage perks for special weapons are going to be like Vorpal, Controlled Burst, Chill Clip, Frenzy, 1-2 Punch, etc. Your special weapon can do a great amount of damage if you pair your loadout up right, so make sure not to sleep on it, and make sure you have a good special weapon for damage. And then for the most part, again, just because your special weapon is good for damage doesn't mean it can't be used for ad clear in the middle. Then we have our heavy weapons, probably the biggest selling point of any sort of damage encounter, alongside your super depending on what you're running. Heavy weapons are usually looking for high damage perks like Explosive Light, Bait and Switch, Lasting Impression, next set there's more, or perks that give us ammo back like 4 times the Charm or Triple Tap. These perks are extremely important, and getting a good roll is critical to the run since your heavy weapon is usually what's going to be doing the most damage to the boss, again, alongside your super. You're also going to look for perks that help you reload, which, yes, 4 times the Charm and Triple Tap help you reload, but it's not technically like a reload, you're just filling your mag up a little bit, which, yeah, okay, you can count that as reloading, whatever. You're looking for other perks also like auto-loading holster or recombination, which don't require you to actually use the gun. As long as you've used a little bit of ammo beforehand, these perks are going to allow you to swap it, stow it away, wait out the timer, then swap back and shoot. So auto-loading and recombination are extremely, extremely strong. Since this will allow you to use your special or primary for damage as well. Heavy weapons also share some great ad clear perks similar to the ones I was talking about earlier. So if you end up running something like a LMG or a grenade launcher, grenade launchers, some of them have chain reaction on them, and some of the LMGs have incandescent or dragonfly, whatever. So heavy weapons in general are probably going to be your biggest damage output alongside your super. I know I said it like 3 times, all right? My bad. But make sure you're looking for, on your heavy weapons, you're going to be looking for something that's going to either help you reload or refill your mag, and then you want a damage perk. So those are the 2 big things. And then also the type of weapon matters too. I was just giving you the base, special, or heavy weapon. But there's a bunch of different types of special and heavy weapons. There's grenade launchers, there's snipers, there's fusion rifles, there's shotguns. I could go on and on. So your type of the weapon really matters. Usually the type of damage special weapon you're going to be looking for is something like a fusion or a sniper. And then obviously the most common the most common option for heavy is rocket launchers, because rocket launchers usually do the most amount of damage. And their ammo economy is pretty solid. Not as good as linear fusion rifles, but usually you're going to be looking for stuff like rocket launchers or linear fusions, depending on what you're doing. So for a damage rotation where you're swapping weapons, you're probably going to use a rocket launcher, because autoloading and recombination tend to have a higher damage pairing on rocket launchers than linears. While with linears, you're going to be looking for something like 4 times the charm or triple tap, where you're going to be only really using your linear the whole time, and just, you're going to be mag dumping it. At the same time, the linears have an extremely good ammo economy. And then finally, we have our exotic weapons, which can be used as, primary, special, or heavy weapons. There's a ton of different exotics in the game, and I'm not going to dive super heavily into all the exotics, because there's like an infinite amount of them. There's like 100. I don't even know how many there are. There's a fuck ton. But these exotic weapons usually excel at one thing or another. It's either add clear or damage. And some of these exotics tend to be substantially better when paired with a certain loadout setup, like Skyburner's Oath. Skyburner's Oath by itself isn't the greatest, but when you pair it with another exotic class armor that builds into solar, and you're using the solar subclass, it can be extremely, extremely strong. I'm just gonna list off a couple good exotics real quick for add clear and for damage, and then you can take what you want here. And if you ever see an exotic, you're like, oh, this one looks pretty cool, this one might be good, look up a damage guide or an add clear guide and just go from there. I'm not gonna cover all of them in here. So some base good exotics for add clear are gonna be Polaris Lance, Graviton Lance, Osteostriga, Sunshot, Lay Monarch, and Dead Messenger. Osteostriga and Sunshot are probably the 2 best ones right there. And then depending on if you're running Void, you'd probably use Graviton Lance and Solar for Polaris Lance. And the Dead Messenger is pretty good all around. It's a wave frame grenade launcher. All wave frames are really good. And then some great damage exotics are going to be Izanagi's Burden, one of the best damage exotics in the game. You got to have the Catalyst, though. Leviathan's Breath, again, another extremely good damage exotic. You want to try to get the Catalyst for this one. It gives you Archer's Tempo, makes it shoot faster. And then you got Thunderlord, which it's not as good as Leviathan's Breath or Izanagi's Burden, but Thunderlord kind of splits the fine line of add clear and good damage. So Thunderlord's pretty good. And there was a bug with it a while ago where people were freaking out like, oh my god, Thunderlord's really good damage, let's all use it for day 1 run. And then, it was good for day 1 run, and that's about it. But if you ever see a modifier with LMG Surge, then yeah, put on Thunderlord. It's pretty solid. And then, we have this season Dragon's Breath, one of the best rocket launchers out there. If you've even looked at my channel, almost every one of the thumbnails for my guides have Dragon's Breath on it, because it's really that good. Staggers the boss, does great damage, has auto-loading on it. I mean, no, it's not technically auto-loading, depending on, if you don't get your ignitions off, but still super, super good. Super, super good exotic. So now that we're done with weapons, we're going to start to talk about our subclass. Again, we're going to divide this into 2 subjects, which are add, clear, and damage. And this section won't be as long as the one I just talked about, because it's pretty straightforward. You have your add clear supers like Storm Trance, Arc Staff, Striker, and Silk Strike, and yes, there are more. And then you have your damage supers like Thunder Crash, Blade Barrage, Golden Gun, and Brood Reaver, which again, there's more. There's also your Panic and Safe supers, that's what I like to call them, like Well of Radiance and Bubble, which also give you damage boost. Although Bubble doesn't give you health outside of the bubble unless you're using something like Helmut 14, so just keep that in mind. While Well of Radiance, all you have to do is sit inside the well and you get basically infinite health and great damage. So, just like the weapon segment, you're going to need to understand what encounter you're going into to decide what kind of super you should use. Add clear counter should probably use something like add clear supers, like I mentioned earlier. Or you're going to end up using a safe super like Well of Radiance or Bubble, because these are basically universal and you don't have to really think about it. Which is why most guides, when they come into Solar Warlock, it's like, yeah, just run Well of Radiance. There's nothing you need to think about. So you can, if you want to just keep it safe, just run Well of Radiance in literally every encounter. Does not matter. And then while boss encounters, you should probably use something like Thunder Crash or Brood Weaver, something to get off a bunch of damage at once. Or again, Well of Radiance. Well of Radiance, I'm pretty sure, is getting a nerf though in the final shape. Keep that in mind. Getting off as much damage as possible is extremely important, but making sure you don't die is even more important. So again, Well of Radiance and the Add Clear supers are extremely good at keeping yourself alive. They won't do as much damage. I mean, Well will. But the Add Clear supers won't do as much damage, but you're going to be keeping yourself alive. And if you don't have good Add Clear weapons, then you should probably be running an Add Clear super. And some single-use supers like Thunder Crash are pretty good at Add Clearing too, even if they might be used for damage. Also, single-use supers tend to get their super back faster. It's just a part of the game now, compared to your Add Clear super. So, again, Keep that in mind. You might want to, knock out 2 birds in 1 stone and run something like Thunder Crash or Brood Weaver. You can do great damage, and you can also add clear with them. And then finally, we have our exotics. Exotics are one of the biggest game-changing aspects of the game. If you are not running an exotic, you are throwing your run. It's just that simple. If you aren't running an exotic, you're throwing. Your exotic will most likely make or break your run, especially if you're new to the game. Because if you're new to the game, you probably aren't gonna have 100 resilience. Although I think the Thunderlord gift right now gives you pretty good stats. But you're probably not gonna have 100 resilience. You're probably not gonna have really good exotic weapons. You're probably not gonna have really good weapons in general. Maybe it doesn't have heal clip on it. You don't have as much understanding to the game. And if you're not running an exotic, like a base exotic, you're probably just gonna die over and over again. So for me, deciding what exotic to run will come down to 2 different things. Do I want more damage or do I want more survivability? I personally tend to pick the damage option if it's a boss encounter, or the survivability option if it's an ad clear encounter. Although some of the bosses are pretty hard to survive against, like the final boss in Ghost to the Deep, so I'll run something like Synthoceps to do some ad clear, and then I'll swap to Lornley, which it's more of a survivability than ad clear, but it also doesn't do damage, so it's kind of like its own little area, just like strictly survivability. So, and I talked about all the survivability exotic earlier, so I'm not going to go over them again. Again, surviving is the most important part. So if there's something you missed here and you want to know more about survivability, just rewind a little bit. I literally listed every single survivability exotic out there. So you want to make sure when you're picking your exotic, it builds into your loadout well, and you understand the encounter if it's damage or ad clear. Because if you're fine on ad clear, then run something with damage, something like Cuirass. If you're good on damage, then run something like ad clear if you're having a hard time surviving. So, I mentioned everything earlier. Go look back at that if you need it. But just in case you don't want to rewind, sorry, I lied. Not for the survivability. But some of the good damage options, I'll just always list them off right now, because some of these are also very good for ad clear. Hunters have Shards of Galanor, which will grant you a 50%, up to 50% of your Blade Barrage back. It's not always 50%, depending on how many Blade Barrage shards you hit. And then they also give you super regen off of your knife kills. So you can get your super back extremely fast with Shards of Galanor. It's kind of like a Phoenix Protocol, if you know what that does. Phoenix Protocol will give you up to 50% of your super, as long as you are sitting in your well and getting kills, or your allies are getting kills in your well. And then you can just chain your super back to back super fast. Hunters also have Celestial Nighthawk, which will combine your Golden Gun shot into one shot, doing mega damage. And then you have Lucky Pants, which will make your hand cannon do a ton of damage depending on how many shots you hit when you swap to it. So Lucky Pants requires a little more thinking, and you should probably watch like a guide on Lucky Pants and see what weapons are good with it before you just like throw it on. It's still very good though, and there's more to it. You have to use it's either a kinetic weapon or a kinetic hand cannon, or a hand cannon that matches your subclass. Warlocks have Hypothesis Veil, which will make your regen for melee and grenades extremely fast. It's similar to like OG Starfire, where you're kind of just like spamming them back to back, but like kind of mixed with Sunbracers. You should be able to get off like 4 to 5 grenades and melees each, maybe like 4 or 3, depending on your if you're spamming them fast enough. And then you have Sunbracers, which is great for ad clear and damage if the boss doesn't move around a ton. And then you have Ozymandias, which will make stasis turret spamming easy as hell. You buff your stasis. I forgot what they're called. The Dusk Chain grenades, the ones you throw on the ground and they hit something, and then they move on and hit something again. When you consume those, you can throw a stasis turret, buff your regen rate on them, and you can just throw them back to back a ton. And then for Titans, we have Curse of the Falling Star, which will buff our Thunder Crash damage. We have Pyrogo Gauntlets, which will make Consecration great for ad clear, and Burning Maul insane for damage. And then Synthoceps, which is great for Solar Bonk Hammer, just spamming for ad clear, or Strand Titan ad clear and damage. So Titans have a bunch of really strong damage outputs, and then Warlocks are a little less, and then Hunters are extremely good too. Hunters also have Star Eater Scales, which I put on the screen right here. I forgot to put this in the little script over here. Star Eater Scales is super strong and can be used on any subclass. As long as you pick up 4 orbs, you're going to get a stacking multiplier of damage, and then you can do a bunch of damage. But again, most important thing here is understanding the encounter. If you do not understand your encounter, you will probably die over and over. So, understanding the encounter will make your loadout setup way easier. So please just take the time to understand exactly what's happening in the encounter and what kind of weapons you have access to. For the most part, all newer players have access to pretty good weapons. Like Amit has an Incandescent on it. You've got Taipan, which has triple tap Frenzy or triple tap, I mean, firing line, but you can't really use firing line in a solo setting. Anyways, they aren't perfect weapons. They aren't as good as something like Cataclysmic or Storm Chaser or some other linears, but they're still pretty good for solo players. So just make sure you know what you have. You know what your armor is looking like, and you understand the encounters. Please just take the time to understand the encounter. There's gonna be more about that in this next section. Our final section is gonna be practice. If you're not practicing, you're gonna lose. It's just that simple. The next subject I want to talk about is practice. When committing to a solo flawless run, you should never be learning the dungeon on the same run. If you're just loading into the dungeon, you're like, oh yeah, I'm in a solo flawless it. And then you don't know the encounters, you don't know what's coming next, you're just gonna be there forever. That's just a waste of time. You should always at least understand the encounters and or have experience and a completion of each encounter beforehand. And if you end up deciding to neglect this, you're just gonna be there forever again. So commit to a normal solo run first is what I recommend. Get through it normally, see how it runs, see how it feels. You can try out different loadouts here, or try watching a guide. Guides are extremely, extremely useful, and that's kind of why I'm making this, is so you don't have to watch guides. But watching other people do runs, even if they don't explain it, just watch, like seeing what they've put on, seeing how they transition to the next mechanic or transition into damage phase, what mods they have on, how they do their damage rotations, if they shoot their Dragon's Breath first, then pull out their fusion, or if they fusion rifle, then they pull out their Dragon's Breath. Understanding how to do your damage phases and your ad clearing phases and seeing what other people do will get you a lot farther than you just sitting there trying over and over and over again with the same loadout. So, I mean, and me personally, every single one of my previous first solo flawless runs previously were all because of guide videos. I did not learn a single one by myself. To be fair, I was newer to the game. I wasn't as, experienced as I am now, and now that I'm actually making guides. But that's why people make guides. It's so, one, they can get views, whatever. But two, it's so that they can push the information out there and show people that it's not as hard as it may seem. So you need to practice, and that's why there's so many practices right here. You see it a bunch. If you do not practice, you will probably lose. And it's inevitable. You're probably going to end up practicing without even knowing it. So, but besides that, that's about it. I know there's probably more I could have gone over, especially with like weapon archetypes, but that would have been so in-depth that this video probably would have lasted like at least an hour. And I personally don't know nearly enough about weapon archetypes to go over them. So, like, I know, like aggressive frame rocket launchers give you a plus 10% damage compared to like the normal rocket launcher frame. I don't know what they are, but there are specifics out there, but this is more meant to be basic compared to advanced. And I know Aegis makes some really good videos on that kind of stuff, and there's some other YouTubers who are way more popular and do a way better job of videos than I do. So I would check them out first, and then, maybe if I really get into it and I'm really, I become really smart, I'll do that. But for the summary, TLDR, in general, you want to make sure you are learning how to survive and that you understand your loadout and how to build it for survivability. So the first part of the video was going over what exotics you can put on to stay alive. You've got great exotics like Lauren Lee Splendor, Assassin Cowl. You've got, I know for Warlocks, Karnsteins. Like, one of the best things, like, all those three exotics for each class are probably the best survivability exotics. Yes, Lauren Lee can only be used on Solar, but Titans in general have some pretty strong damage resistance or survivability in general, and you've got your Barricade. And then once you learn your survivability and how to build into it, you've also got your loadout crafting, which, plays around that in general. And then you've got to understand the encounters. If you don't understand the encounter, you're not going to get anywhere. Same thing with the practice. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't practice. Decide if the encounter is ad clear or damage. If it's ad clear, run something a little more tame, run something with survivability. You can run just strictly, you got your Gear Falcons on, you're just going crazy. You have an LMG on, avoid LMG, you're just going crazy. Or if it's damage, you're throwing on Dragon's Breath, a fusion rifle, you're putting on your scatter signal, on your Callus mini tool. Make sure you understand what's going on in the encounter first before you just dive in. Take your time also building your loadouts and maybe watching videos doing it as well. And I know that kind of bleeds into the final point, which is practice. Practice the encounter over and over. Make sure you get at least one clean rotation done. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it shouldn't be like, oh, I forgot to shoot there again. Or, oh, I forgot to proc my Radiant. Or, I forgot to weaken the boss. It should be, maybe I've missed one fusion shot. You know, I forgot my swapping to my other gun wasn't perfect. That's fine. But it doesn't need to be exactly perfect, but it needs to be good enough to where you're consistently doing that damage over and over again. You're consistently getting that ad clear good enough so you're not dying. And then, you know, watch guides. Like, watching someone else do something is probably more efficient than you just trying shit over and over again, because you're just going to be there, again, all day, just trying out the infinite amount of loadouts for each class that there are. So, you know, guides usually have insanely good tips. Pause. They have extremely good information, so. But yeah, that's it. There's a good chance I missed some information. I probably repeated myself a ton. Again, this is a new style of video I want to try. It's kind of like that one Diablo 4 YouTuber, which I played Diablo 4 for a little bit, but he, like, does, like, the blackboard and, like, he draws on it, and I don't know, my drawing isn't very good, so, I kind of wanted to try this out, see how it went. I covered everything I want to cover, and if you guys liked it, let me know. If you didn't like it, just like the video. That's pretty obvious, you know, way to go. Leave me a comment if you like it, and, let me know if there's something I can improve. I know I could probably improve my, you know, the speed at which I say things. I know I say things a little too fast sometimes, and, I know I probably stuttered a couple times or messed up, but cut me a little bit of slack. I just want to try this out, get it out there today, and then, you know, we'll see how it goes. Last thing, though, if you have any questions or you want any help, join the Discord. I'll flash it up on screen right now, and it's always in the description. You know, the Discord's actually has been pretty good lately. Like, we've had people joining, we've had people talking. It's pretty cool. You know, I'm running Wave 10 farms right now. I want to run raids eventually, maybe Crucible custom matches. So, you know, just join in and, you know, talk it up. See what's going on. Also, I know there were some issues with my Discord. I thought I had them figured out, but if you couldn't type before, now you can. Sorry. Okay, guys, that's it. I'm gonna stop rambling on forever. Thanks for all the support recently. I'm almost at 1,500 subscribers. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks, guys.